Got a book of his work that came out in 2010 called A Sketchy Past, The Art of Peter de Sève. And he illustrated a children's book called The Duchess of Whimsy that just so happened to be written by his
My wife, yes.
And he makes his home in New York City with his family and his dog, Darla.
She's dead. We're not off to a very good start, are we? Now, she was an old dog.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I didn't think we were going to go there away, man.
I'm so sorry.
That happens. It's
Wow.
fine. I'm fine.
We really are effed. And to take it up a notch, I think the crowning achievement of his professional career is he designed one of the characters featured in the Ice Age quadrilogy known as
Scrat.
Scrat.
Squirrel, rat, Scrat.
Scrat. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Peter de Sève. The first question I wanted to ask you is most people who know your work probably might not consider it fantastic, although obviously, doing character designs for talking squirrels and talking mammoths and so forth, that is fantastic. But I know for a fact from our conversation that you're a fan of a fantastic artist who was one of the grand masters here at Spectrum, and that's Frank Frazetta.
Frank Frazetta, yeah. I grew up a total science fiction fantasy geek.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I collected comics, I collected illustrated books, and I collected virtually anything I could find by Frazetta. Any paperback cover, everything. I had pictures, Frazetta posters all over my wall, sort of wallpapered. And it was, and that kind of never went away. I mean, I've put Frazetta in his proper place in terms of the context of things, because there's stuff that you can kind of, you can poke at with Frazetta's stuff. He's very, it's very testosterone.
Sure.
But there's a draftsmanship and a love of drawing and painting even that comes through all that, and that really inspired me, and continues to. I remember all the stuff I used to study.
Did you buy all the was it Ballantine books that used to come out years ago? That all of that kind of stuff, and I know you collected some of original artwork too, right?
Yeah, I couldn't really afford. I could never afford to buy one of the paintings, but at a certain point, I was able to afford the sketches that would occasionally come up for sale on eBay and stuff like that. And so I've got a pretty nice collection of some of his a couple of preliminary watercolors and a bunch of sketches. And to me, that's where all the juice is anyway. A lot of that falls away when he went to the finish, but the sketches are delicious. So yeah, so it still hangs on a little bit.
I agree. Yeah. When you do a cover for the New Yorker or for anything, any kind of editorial illustration, if it happens to include something like a superhero reference or a dragon or something like that, as a problem solver, being an illustrator, is that easier for you? Is it harder for you? Are you jazzed that you get to do something that's a little less mundane? Or
well, actually, what my whole career, I think, has been me twisting things to my own ends, okay. Really. So I've illustrated a lot of articles and things with superheroes and with mythical creatures and fairy tales as metaphor, because that's the stuff I really enjoy drawing, and it was a way for me to solve these problems in my own language. And I think that that worked out very well for me. I was able to sort of figure out my own point of view in how to solve these problems.
Gotcha. When you got out of school from Parsons, and I don't know if we ever covered this when I spoke with you before, but how quickly, because a lot of young artists will want to know, how quickly, once you got out of school, did you begin working regularly and find your sea legs as a professional? Yeah,
I was doing lots of black and white spot illustrations for magazines. It's when computer magazines, it's basically when the personal computer just arrived. Mm-hmm. So there were tons of really boring magazines that were desperate to have illustrations to make their articles look a little bit more compelling. And so it was a good time for young illustrators to go out and particularly colorblind illustrators, of which I was and continue to be one.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I did not know that about you.
Yeah. So I like to say I'm color confused.
Okay.
Because it's a red-green, it's a subtle thing, but and it's actually very, very common among men.
It is.
But it made me, I was very apprehensive about color and doing color work. And so I kind of just eased my way into it with, first I did a lot of black and white work, but there's no way to make a career just doing black and white. And then slowly I got braver with the color, and bigger color pieces led to bigger magazines, and and very organically over the course of, I would say, it took a few years, 3 years I think, before I was working for New York magazine, not the New Yorker. The New Yorker didn't come till much later, but a little bit of Rolling Stone and all over the place. But I should say, it's a long answer, but one of the most beneficial things for me when I first got out was to work as an assistant to a book designer. And now, if I had had my choice, I would love to have worked with an illustrator that, from whom I could have learned something about the craft, how to paint, how to do these basic things, which, by the way, there was not a lot of when I was in school. It was a period in art schools where they weren't teaching a lot of practical stuff. It was more of a sort of a slash and burn period of very expressionistic work. And the idea of learning how to paint in a classical way was dull, passé. It was passé. But anyway, I did work for this book designer, and even though he wasn't doing the kind of work that I was interested in, to spend time in a studio and see how somebody gets a job, how they discuss the job with an art director, how they start to work on it, how they gather their reference, all this stuff, was hugely helpful for me. About a year and a half in, we both decided, he decided first that I was the worst assistant possible.
Okay.
And he asked me to go, which I did, which was great, because it was time to go. It was time to leave the nest, as it were. And then that's when I started being an illustrator, I guess, for real. Right. It was because I was kind of forced out.
Okay. Now, when you get asked for advice from students, I'm sure you talk about practical things like composing and painting and staging and reference and all that sort of stuff.
No, I don't.
Never at all.
No.
Okay. But I'm really thinking, how often do you have to stop and give young students business advice, or people who are new professionals business advice yourself?
Well, it's interesting. I think it's very interesting. The students I meet now are very, very concerned about the business aspects of being an illustrator, much more so than we were when I was coming up. I don't think we were particularly well prepared in terms of how much to ask for a piece, how to ask for it, how to negotiate.
Your marketplace worth and so forth.
Yeah. So I think students today seem to be much more savvy, or desire to be savvy, about how to market themselves, how to present themselves. And I sometimes I feel a little bit behind that curve, because I was able to establish a career pretty much before the internet was really the way to do it. So I was already sort of on the road, and maybe not the best person to give advice in that arena, but there's some basic things that I help. It's just common sense stuff that I relate.
Now, have you ever taken on like an intern or someone to kind of mentor along?
I have a few times. I had summer interns, which has been great. But for the past 4 or 5 years, I've had a young woman named Malia Hughes, who is managing the studio, and we call her an assistant, but she's really the studio manager, and keeps things running and keeps me organized, and also helps me gather reference and things like that.
I'm curious because it would seem to me, and this may be conjecture on my part, that the kind of work that you do doesn't really allow you to do things like shows and events, other than I guess when your work is being showcased like a gallery.
It does
show.
allow me to do it, or it doesn't?
It does not. That you do more work from home and from the studio, and don't get a chance to get out much. Yeah. Do you? And how much travel does your career afford you to kind of get out and meet people who love your work?
Well, it's the most wonderful thing to be invited to a thing like this, and so I carve out the time. I mean, you can stay too busy all the time if you choose to, but this kind of thing is it's very nourishing for me to meet young artists, to see established professionals whose work I know, but I never met them in person, and to be able to have a drink with them and exchange war stories or what kind of paper you use, what artist you love. There's nothing like it. And I don't know if you guys were able to catch that panel yesterday. It was about sort of the benefits of the internet in terms of the artistic community. Those benefits are, there's no question, it's an absolutely vital way to connect with artists, but there's nothing like being at a place like this where you can actually have face-to-face conversations and establish relationships in person. So, good for you guys that you showed up.
Definitely. And I hope you return to Spectrum one day.
Yes, so do I. So do I.
I did not know that you were colorblind, but I was going to ask you a question about the kind of medium that you work in. You do beautiful, I guess, watercolor and maybe gouache.
Watercolor, yeah.
Okay. And I assume that you use Photoshop or some digital tools on some level to either enhance it or to move things around graphically.
No, I don't.
Not at all?
No.
Now, are you considering that at all, or because I can only imagine.
Now, I'd never thought of it before. Just now.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, no.
No, I'm incredibly. My technique is very, very old-fashioned, very old school. It's a miracle I work in the digital universe. It is.
But
it
you're
is.
Not a Luddite,
I'm not a Luddite, and I do use Photoshop to scan my drawings. It's particularly helpful in constructing a composition of various elements. It used to be horrifying when I had to do a complex piece with several characters in it. I didn't have a copy machine, so I would run down to the copy place. It was 2 blocks away, and I'd say, "Can you print this? I need you to print it out at 25, 30, 40, 45%, also 40%." And he'd give me a stack of things, and I'd cut them up, and I'd make these jigsaw puzzles of these compositions.
This
and
is
it
old
took
school.
Forever. And this, fantastic. So I use Photoshop in a very rudimentary, very, very basic way. Sometimes if I'm scanning a piece, I do juice it a little bit. In fact, almost always, my watercolors tend to need a little bit of a boost.
Make it a little more print ready?
Yeah, give it a little more kick. But I really don't, I don't do much in the way of After Effects or anything like that.
Okay. That's interesting. I just thought I'd ask.
There's so many interesting things about me. So many things.
I really was curious because it would seem as if for someone who works and does artwork for production or just on-demand assignments from someone, that eventually everyone will have to really be doing a lot more digital work than they will traditional. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with an art director here who said that, and he's been an art director for a long time, or creative director. He used to get tons of originals in, and that's what people would send. Now he maybe gets 5 or 6 a year.
Oh, yeah.
And most of it is just, it's just a file,
Yeah, you're talking about portfolios that are presented.
Like someone he would commission work from.
Yeah.
An original painting.
Oh yeah,
that's. See it and
that's.
smell it, and it
Yeah.
just doesn't happen anymore.
I mean, the truth is, I tend to send scans of my finishes too. Even the only exception is the New Yorker. I want them to scan it. I want it to be their problem. I want it to be their fault, basically. I guess.
Having worked so successfully as a commercial illustrator and for so long, I'm just curious if you have any pinings of one day just doing personal work and becoming a fine artist.
No.
No.
Not really. The thing is, I'm lazy. I stay very busy with the illustration, and the truth is, I really envy people like Anita, for instance, who can, in between jobs, they generate pieces on their own. And in between jobs, I nap. And I don't, quickly go to the board. Same thing with JB Monge, who's constantly does gorgeous work, and when he doesn't have an assignment, he's doing a giant painting. I've never been that way. I love to draw, I love to sketch. I have sketchbooks full of things that would make great paintings, but they never do. And so I'm discouraging you from being that way. Don't do that. What was the question?
It doesn't matter.
It really doesn't matter.
Does anybody have any questions for Peter? I was going to ask you, because I've read interviews with bands and musicians, and they all talk about the first time they heard their song on the radio, and we were driving down the road, and we jumped out of the car and started dancing on the side of the road. And
I'm not a musician, though.
I know that, though. And so I'm curious, the first time when you got your first New Yorker cover, I mean, were you excited? Were you like, oh my God?
I was. It was really exciting because I never, ever figured I would be a New Yorker. Actually, once you do a New Yorker cover, you become a New Yorker cover artist. It's like winning the Oscar. You, from now on, every time your name is mentioned, you're an Oscar winner. So, and it was great credentials and everything. But the first time I used to have a joke with my mother, who loved my work and was really supportive of my work, and sometimes I would show her a piece, and she'd say, "Oh, well," she was English. "Oh, it's lovely, but it's not the New Yorker, is it?"
No.
So when I did get one finally published, I didn't tell her, and I let it show up in her mailbox. So that was a good moment.
Cool.
And then I shouted at her. It's like, why did you? I didn't do that.
I don't know. I can't remember. Do you have any other artists or any other creative people in your family, immediate family?
Not really. No, my grandfather was a pianist, but I mean, nobody who really ever made a career at it.
Okay.
We tend to be. I think I have an artistic bent, but nobody else did it professionally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned 4 Ice Age movies, and I was curious if you had anything coming up that you wanted to talk about in terms of a project that you're working on that you can talk about, personal or something else.
Yeah, I'm developing 2 story ideas of my own with Fox, with Blue Sky, who do the Ice Age movies, and that's interesting. It's sort of, I'm wearing a different hat. Mm-hmm. For those, I came up with the story, I pitched the story, and I've been doing the character designs, and I'm working with the writers to try to steer the story and the structure, and I guess technically I'm executive producer.
Right.
But it's you've heard the term of development hell. That's where I live. Because it can go on, and it's exciting, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm doing, it's the way my career has been from the beginning. I had no idea where it's going, and it's led from one thing to another. I never imagined that anybody would consider taking an idea of mine and develop it for a possible movie. So I'm very happy to even get this far. Are they going to get made? I don't know.
What exactly is your role as executive producer?
It's cool. It's really cool. Actually, it's not cool at all.
It's not cool at all.
It's mostly I just meet with the development execs, and we discuss the story over and over and over again. And I'm just basically shepherding it. And for now, it's very exciting. I'm essentially the director. until we find a director.
An actual director.
Yeah, a real director.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Well, no, I didn't
Yeah,
say that. I didn't say
can
that
see
at
it
all.
in your expression, though.
If this comes to pass, do we have any idea, or we're just lost in hell at this point? We have no idea when.
Oh yeah, it's not on the slate, as they say.
Okay.
No, not yet. I'll let you know though.
Okay.
When
You can't give us any tidbits in terms of what kind of tale it is, or?
Oh no.
Okay. Does
No,
anybody
I
have any
can't.
questions?
Any questions?
Any questions at all?
It's got to be a question. I was really counting on
All
questions.
right.
This colorblind thing,
I can't hear it.
the fact that you're colorblind, that completely blows me away.
Oh, you never knew that?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Are there any? Did anything ever happen where the colors, you had to change the colors, or anything like that, or does nobody know?
Oh, they knew in the beginning. I mean, my first I was very lucky. My wife has a fantastic color sense, and so for the first at least 5 years of my career, she stood over me and said, "No, it's too much green," or if you won't be able to see it, but if you put a slight wash of alizarin crimson in there, it'll juice it up. And I started to sort of absorb it and understand it. And my palette is, I'm sure everybody's palette is arranged exactly the same way all the time, but and so I have to do that, so I know where everything is for sure. So I don't mix the brown with the green, which is something I can do. But the most terrifying thing to me is an unlabeled watercolor set. Terrifying. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do a painting. I got to know where they are. Yeah.
Hi. I think one of the most interesting things about illustration and animation is that you can make it humorous and you can invent different imaginative things. So you do that with your work. I was just wondering,
Yeah.
what the people that give you assignments tell you to make it humorous, or whether that's you on your.
It went out. But I heard most of what you said, and you're asking me, I have a lot of sort of humorous and
Yeah.
kind of fantastic elements in my
was-
work, and does the client ask for that?
Yeah, or is that just you?
Right. It's mostly me. It's me because I like to draw dragons, and I like to draw old men in Victorian costumes. And I just when that expression, when you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Yeah.
That's me. But so I like to solve the problems with my own, with my own box of tools, as it were, and for the most part, I mean, something like the New Yorker, the ideas are self-generated, and so there's nobody asking me. Occasionally, there'll be a request could you do something on winter or something on Thanksgiving, and so I've got that parameter, but then I come at it with whatever I can think of. But there were many, many years, if not decades, where it would be very specific that what we need here is a man in a business suit with a computer. Can you do that? And I did it over and over and over and over again. You have to find a different way to skin the cat.
I'm a really big fan of yours, and I really like how your illustration looks so effortless and whimsical. Effortless in a good way.
It is
like you
effortless. I just do it in my sleep. It's really simple.
No, you make it seem so
Thank
come
you.
so easily.
Thank you.
And I'm just wondering, for example, in Finding Nemo, when you designed the turtle, like during your research and study stage, do you do like super serious, realistic drawing of the turtle from different angle, and then you do a whimsical design, or it just come like?
Well, it's a good question, and if you didn't hear it, she referred to when I designed. I did some of the designs for the turtle in Finding Nemo, and how much did I study actual reference, and did I do realistic studies of that thing in order to then exaggerate it? I study the pictures, and I do look at the anatomy and try to comprehend that, but I don't tend to do realistic drawings of the thing at first. What I'm looking at are the global shapes and how I can exploit them and boil them down in an interesting, fun way. So it's actually a lot of loose sketching to find my way. But it's really important to look at the reference, understand how the animal's built. Terrell Whitlatch, who is the premier animal anatomist, if you don't know her work. You're in my slide presentation later, Terrell. As an example of, I had to draw a bear for an animated commercial that I didn't get a couple of weeks ago. And I thought it's finally time for me to learn how to draw a bloody bear. And I found, because I'm looking at photographs, but I wasn't getting it. And Terrell had done a bunch of blueprints for Brother Bear of basically a bear with its fur clumps described accurately and then flayed, so you're just seeing the musculature, and then the same pose just in bones. And it's like, oh, that's how they're built. And that kind of comprehension allows you to exaggerate it in a convincing way. You have to know what you're exaggerating. I think that's the point of it. I'm doing a lecture later on character design. You might want to be there. All this stuff is going to be in it. It's going to be so awesome.
Great question.
Thanks.
I love in a sketchy past. There's an anecdote you tell when you were working on Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I think it was Quasimodo's feet that were pointed. I think you were hitting a level of frustration with the project and not seeing your.
I know what you're referring to. When I did the first film I worked on was The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I did a lot of drawings that were, I think, universally ignored by the directors and everybody working on the thing, and that's fine. I was some, upstart from outside of the studio, which was very unusual back then, especially for Disney. So I'd done a bunch of drawings, and one day I asked James Baxter, who was the animator on Quasimodo. He was the guy that animated him, and he's brilliant animator. As an example, he did this drawing of Scar. He animated Scar, I think, for Lion King, and he drew a lion walking in a circle. Just imagine figuring that out. But so I asked him. I said, "So James, how much did I influence the design for the character?" And he said, "Oh well, I used those feet that you did, the floppy feet." Thanks, James.
How far into the project were you when you asked him that question? Was it all the way through?
It was after.
It was after. Okay.
Yeah, it was probably at the premiere. I was like, "So how much did I have anything?"
Yeah, I was kind of wondering, what do you do to get over the fear of the blank page? Like when you're approaching a new project, like every artist, it seems, runs into that wall.
It's true, the terrifying blank page. After doing sketches and getting frustrated and realizing it's not happening, I don't know. I sometimes go for a run. That's really helpful to me. And I have one of my greatest indulgences has been my library. And even when I was a hungry student, whenever I saw a book that I thought, this could help me, if it could help me get through one assignment, it's paid for itself. I mean, over and over. If it helps you solve a problem, it just paid for itself, 10 times, 15 times, depending on what you're getting paid for the drawing. But I digress. So I will sometimes sit in a chair and get a stack of books by people whose work I love, and not necessarily if I'm drawing turtles. In fact, the books I'll avoid will be the books on how to draw turtles, or the premier turtle artist. I will avoid that person, but I'll look at people whose work kind of liberates me. The marks they make and the shapes that they use, and it's just a way to just kind of loosen up mentally a little bit, so you're not just drawing on your own shallow pool of experience or drawing tools. You know what I mean? It just mixes things up a little bit.
Thank you.
How did you get into Disney? Did you
I
send
broke
a
in.
portfolio or?
As they say, but through a window. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I totally stepped on your question. How did I get into Disney? Like the rest of my career, it happened without my planning it. I never thought I would work for animation. I never imagined that that I would do character design. I figured that's for animators. New Yorker covers are for New Yorker cover artists. I'm not one of those. But what happened was I illustrated a story called Finn McCool, which is an Irish folk tale, and it was not animation, nor was it actually a book, but it was an animatic. It was before. It was basically camera moving over pictures, soft dissolves one into another, telling a story that is not quite animated. It's just I'm not describing it well, but it was a book that they put to film, essentially. And a producer, a guy named Roy Conley at Disney, who had just started working there, and therefore I don't think he knew the rules either, asked whether I'd be interested in submitting, doing sketches. And so he said, do you want to send me, do you want me to send you what they've done so far? And I said, no, please don't, because it'll just infect me, basically, and I won't be able to get it out of my head. So let me go at it fresh. I'll read the book and just do sketches and see what you think. And that was my first job in animation. I don't know how many weeks it was. It was probably a very small, short number of weeks, and it just led from sort of one thing to another. And the next thing it was just as Katzenberg. I could still smell his cologne in the studio, but he had just quit, and to begin DreamWorks. And so I never dealt with him directly at Disney, but then I was invited to work on Prince of Egypt right after that, which is a pretty good story, actually. I'll digress, tell a very short story. I got a phone call one day, because I don't have an agent. I didn't have an agent then, and I get on the phone, and it's, oh, hi, I have Mr. Katzenberg for you. And I was like, what? I have Mr. Katzenberg for you, and it was, hi, Peter, I just wanted to tell you about this new movie we're working on. It's the first thing we're doing for Prince of Egypt. It's going to be really exciting. It's going to be great. It's going to be, and I thought, oh, my God. What an opportunity, and I don't want to work on this movie at all. Prince of Egypt. Moses, it wasn't speaking to me, and I couldn't believe it, but I said, no thank you. And they were smart, I don't even know how much anyway. So 10 minutes later, phone rings again. And the woman says, hi, I have Mr. Spielberg on the phone for you. Who is this? So I said, okay, and had a conversation with Steven Spielberg, where Steven pitched me his movie. I was like, yeah, go on. Yeah. And I said, this is a dream come true for me. And I really, really, really want to work for you, but I don't want to do bad work. I want to work on something that I'm going to do good stuff for you. So I don't know if I should do this. And he said, no, it's going to be great. You do it. You think, I said, it feels earthbound to me. And he said, no, it's going to be really fun. It's going to have action and humor and everything. And I was like, okay, Steve. Okay, I'll do it. So I did it. And I ended up doing, really mediocre work for it. The end of the story.
Great story.
But then after that, I got other jobs, so it was okay.
Yes. Do you approach character design for editorial work versus feature film any differently, and do you prefer one or the other?
I don't know if you heard, but do I approach character design for editorial work differently than I do for film? You're anticipating everything I'm going to say in my lecture later on. Because most of the editorial work I did was before I was doing character design for animation, and I realized that I think I started out as a character designer. There are things that you do for film that you don't have to do for editorial, in that you're doing one picture and you have to like solve that character in one angle, and then it's it, you're out. But with animation, you really have to think of it, and now more than ever, more so than when I first started, which was doing 2D work. Now I do 3D work, CG work. You have to think of it more in terms of a sculpture. And yeah, you could do a pretty drawing of your character, but it's so easy to cheat on the page. You really have to understand how that lives in space. And I remember one of the early drawings I was doing for the villain in Ice Age, Soto. It was a big saber-tooth. And I drew this really cool kind of flames of hair on his back on one angle, in profile. And one of the tech guys said, one of the modelers said, yeah, but what does it look like from the front? And I was like, oh, that's your problem, isn't it? But it wasn't his problem. Then I learned that it's easy to cheat, and that you have to be able to defend your thing. You really have to think of it as a sculpture. So yeah, that's how they differ.
Peter, I was wondering about, because a lot of fans look at the animated features that come out from the States, and we love them, and a lot of them are really great, and a lot of them really serve story, but we're always wondering if animation from America will ever take on different themes as across the seas. In other words, more adventure themes, like an Akira or something along those lines. And I'm wondering if you think that it ever will, or will we continue to see the kinds of things that we've seen in the last 10, 15 years, 20 years?
Well, I would say this, and I know it's going to sound, and it'll be so unusual for me because it's so cynical, but I wouldn't expect innovation from the studios, the big studios. You're not going to see them breaking form and coming out, oh my God, I've never seen a story like that. They don't like to do that. They really like to know what they're making. The bigger these films get, I mean, they put $200 million in an animated film. They're not risking anything, really. I mean, visually, they are astonishing. And some of them are very, very well written. And there's always hope that the right team does it. You look at The Incredibles.
The Incredibles, yeah, that's an example.
Unbelievable movie. Yeah. Iron Giant. I mean, there are great movies, but I think it's the smaller films that are going to change how the bigger films get made. And it's because smaller films have less to risk. They can be more personal, and they can be more unusual. And I just think with technology allowing smaller groups to put together very beautiful looking films, you're going to see some really, really surprising, great stuff that then I'm predicting the studios will see it and they'll say, oh, let's do that. That's my theory.
No,
bad theory.
It's a great theory. Any other questions? Let's go ahead here.
In terms of how you price your work, is it different for an illustration for the New Yorker? Do they have like a set rate versus, doing stuff for animation studios, or?
Yeah, they really are. The rates for something like the New Yorker versus animation, it's apples and oranges. You'll do drawings for a studio over a course of time. I used to, for many years, I started my approach that I sort of suggested out of nowhere was that, like for Hunchback, you'll pay me a certain amount for every 10 drawings. and usually there's more. You know, I'll do more than, I don't do just 10, but on paper we'll say I'll study a character in 10 drawings. And I got away with that for years. It's in recent years, though, it began, I think at a certain point the studios realized that that was not really cost effective, that they need to be able to have your brain in your hand for a longer period of time without such a loud ticking clock. So now I've worked at, I have a day rate for animation. And for the New Yorker, you know, nobody's going to get rich doing magazines anytime soon. Unfortunately, that's all changed. And the New Yorker has, you know, I think I do fairly well in terms of the New Yorker, but you know, it's not astronomical. It's not, but it's better than most other editorial. The thing about editorial, and Anita, maybe you can verify this, is that the rates for magazines and newspapers have not changed. They've gone down. It's incredible. It's really incredible. But that also speaks to the health of that industry, which is, you know, struggling.
As well as being an artist, you're an art collector. Are there any pieces that when you win the lottery, you're saying that's going to be on my wall someday? Or,
yeah, actually.
And are there any also any new artists that you have suddenly caught your attention that you say, oh, I have to have something by that person someday?
Yeah, one of the pieces that I'm very intent on getting, Aaron, is that Frazetta drawing that you showed me yesterday. I would like that. Yeah, you know, I don't have any. They call those Grail pieces, right? A Holy Grail. I don't really think in those terms. I just keep my eyes open, and I at auctions and things like that, or if I meet somebody who's, say, like you, teasing me with a drawing that you have, and then saying you're not going to give it to me or whatever, you know, that kind of thing. That's different. But no, I just keep my eyes open for pieces, and I do trade sometimes with people whose work, you know, colleagues and stuff like that. So it's, yeah.
Did you say you had a lecture later?
I do. I did have a lecture later, but I said pretty much everything here that I was going to say there, so I'm not going to do it. No, I'm only kidding. I'm going to do a talk on character design.
And it'll be wonderful. Thank you guys for being here today. Thank you, Peter DeSève.
Thank you very much.
You're awesome.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you,
Really
brother.
fun.
All right.
Great.
I'm sorry about that.
I'm kidding.
Oh, okay. I thought you were serious.
Really? Oh my God. I was kidding about Darla, the dog.
You mind?
Oh my God.
Can we take a shot real quick?
Sure.